Apple had its September event, the big one for the year, and as usual, they announced new iPhones and a couple of other new products. So we'll spend a bit of time in this episode just talking about the event, and also just where's Apple heading. Why does Apple get the type of criticism it does? Is it warranted, etc., etc.? And we'll go through it in a couple of stages. But first, we'll start with the products themselves. Now, it seemed like it was split into four major categories. I want to touch on the Apple Watch just briefly. Now, okay, they've added LTE to it, which means you can, I guess, does that in theory mean you can take calls on your watch? I don't know, but
4G on your phone, what could be better?
Yeah. I still, maybe that adds some functionality, but I don't know about you, Steve. I don't know if you've picked one up recently. I just happened to I was in an Apple store yesterday. I picked one up, and I still was asking myself, why would I spend $500 on this thing?
What's that you're saying, Ben? Are you saying something? Look, I don't know. Look, it just adds to the connectivity, I guess. It means that probably you somewhere down the track, if not already, I'm not really across the iWatch, or Apple Watch, I guess it'll mean that you don't need to carry your phone around with you. So that would be the big thing that I would imagine.
Do you think do you think that's a big deal for the iPhone then, if it negates the need for carrying an iPhone around?
It's a big deal for the watch.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for the watch, which means, so if you go out for a run, you don't need to take your phone.
Yeah.
You'd be able to run all your apps and everything, your GPS, purely through the watch. So I think that's a big thing. Although you might have to go for a 30-minute run because that's all the battery time you'll get. I don't know. But
yeah, exactly.
No longer.
But
get to a charge point within 35 minutes.
So do you think, just purely from phone functionality standpoint, the watch and the phone and the iPhone can coexist, so to speak?
Well, my big reason for never having got an Apple Watch in the past would be because you always have to pair it with a phone. So for me, it would probably actually increase the likelihood of me getting an Apple Watch.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's
still highly unlikely.
Absolutely.
But it's doubled the chance.
Yes.
From absolutely not to highly unlikely.
So maybe 5 revisions later, you might consider one.
Yeah, I just don't like a watch that you have to charge all the time. To me, that's not a good watch.
Maybe it's tied in with improvements in battery technology, which hasn't really gone anywhere, really, has it? I mean, they've made efficiencies and whatever, but it's still the same. Like the phone obviously only gets a day of charge, for instance.
Well, that's right. Now, if it means that the watch can operate, say, with your LTE turned off, and maybe get 4 or 5 days charge like that, and it's only a day's charge if you have your LTE on, then I guess that means that there's a trade-off there, which I think would be good. But I'm kind of thinking with LTE, that probably means you need a SIM card. And if you need a SIM card, that's not so good. So maybe it's just back to absolutely not for me.
Yeah. I know I won't be purchasing one. All right. We'll just touch briefly on the new Apple TV. And I think the key points here, obviously, the addition of 4K was a no-brainer, but I think more than anything else, what was really interesting about the announcement wasn't the actual box itself. It was the fact that, with the exception of Disney, Apple was able to make a deal with all the major Hollywood studios to basically just make a 4K upgrade across all their movies free for everyone. So I have an iTunes library. I don't have to repurchase all of those films in 4K now. They just come as 4K. Well, with the exception of any Disney films I might have in the back catalogue. That I thought was a win across the board, and from a negotiation standpoint, it would put other like Amazon or not YouTube. Yeah, I guess YouTube's got the service too. Any other streaming service would be in a position to negotiate something like that with the studios, because Apple has set that bar there.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I agree with you. I think this is a huge win, because this is an actual advance in technology. It's not so much the business or marketing side of this. Just think in the past, if you have a Blu-ray, which they did, then you have to go and buy the Blu-ray DVD. Or if you only have a high definition set, and then you have to go and get a 4K set, a monitor, and all these things that are additive. Here, for the first time, is where technology just allows the upgrade, and you don't have to upgrade any hardware, presuming you already have a 4K monitor.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant. And that to me is what you would expect to see. That is how, I guess, technological advances should be made. When you consider what people have been through, having to go from a DVD player to a Blu-ray, or go from a cathode ray to probably a plasma screen, which wasn't HD, then go to an HD screen again. I think this sort of thing's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just, there's no effort on our behalf to get the upgrade. I think it's great.
Apart from spending the $300 on the new Apple TV, which I'm sure they'll be happy about. They'll be happy to take your money on that one.
But the thing is it doesn't matter. You're going to upgrade to that at some stage, and that's just going to be standard. So the standard feature is standard. Yeah. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although product. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. All right, then we'll move on. We'll move on to the two iPhones now. We'll start with what would be called, what has already been called the dull iPhone announcement, the iPhone 8, which a lot of people are saying should have just been called the 7S because it wasn't anything special. And I thought, well, okay, they're milking that iPhone 6 design from 2014. All right, so the iPhone 8 is now the official fourth version of that design. In terms of the shape, I mean, they have changed the back so that it could get wireless charging and all that sort of thing. I mean, we'll get to the criticism aspect a bit later, but I thought that are people missing the point of what the purpose of this phone is? Because they're trying to say, Samsung's coming out with, edge-to-edge displays, and Android is so far advanced with this on, and they're saying, iPhone 8, it's still got bezels, it's still got a chin, it's still got a, all this sort of stuff. They reduced the amount of colors. And I mean, it's just a typical sort of year-on-year upgrade where they, do further refinements and, make it go faster and all of that. It's not, you can't say that it's a crap phone, in other words. It seems like, that it's just not something that, sort of set anyone's world on fire, even though there's a lot of really good functionality in the phone itself.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things to think about here. So they've released an iPhone X and an iPhone 8, which probably should have been called the 7S. But we can be sure of one thing, there's not going to be an iPhone 9. And the next iPhone that comes out will be all new, and it'll be the X1 or X2 or whatever that will be. So really, this is the last model of this generation iPhone, the 8s are. And the X is probably a stepping stone to what comes next. So I would think that the really big iPhone will be next year's.
Yeah, and if we segue into that now, so the iPhone 10, because of the fact that it's so expensive and I guess forward leaning in the technology, I would expect that the iPhone 8 is there because they needed a phone that didn't cost $2,000 to buy, because they needed one that was still within the realm of normalcy, even for Apple's pricing.
Honestly, Ben, we might talk about the pricing later, but honestly, like, the prices for both those phones are just way too much.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X, I think, is I'm not excited by either of them. But that doesn't mean they're not fantastic or they're not offering something much, much greater. And I thought back to this. I thought back to, the original Mac in 1984 and, before that. But, Steve Jobs released the whole calligraphy font. And for some people, that was a really big deal. And then I can sort of think now, thinking back, it was a big deal because it was exciting. It was so much more exciting than any of the beige boxes.
Mm.
But in reality, what was so great about it? You know, unless you wanted to type in a different font to whatever the standard font was at the time, it was no big deal. But with the benefit of hindsight, it showed you where Mac OS was going.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the iPhone X, it's kind of that level. If you're kind of standing back from it, no, it's not very exciting. And, they should have done more, big deal this, big deal that. I think in 5 years' time, you'll look back, or everyone will look back and say, wow,
yeah,
I've got this amazing X5, but I can see where the X was going.
Yeah, and I guess just to sort of round out some of the things that they did announce with that phone, the fact that it's just about all screen, that again pioneers the wireless. Well, it doesn't pioneer wireless charging because that's been around for a while, but it brings it to the iPhone finally. They've made a lot about the Face ID feature. I guess me personally, I'd want a year of real world field testing before I'm convinced that I'd want to use it. So that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't ever get the first generation of anything like this. And I just it just makes me wonder: is it because you could see that they were going to a full screen device that when they finally did announce it, that it just wasn't special for people?
Look, I think people are just too hooked up on the features. Somebody expects someone to drop an ultra thin, transparent piece of plastic.
Yeah.
That when you pick up, it turns into a screen. You can make calls on, you can play games on, and you can do all these amazing things with, and then you just slip it back in your pocket.
Yeah.
That's the iPhone X in 5 years' time, in 6 years' time. And I think that's what people are missing. The Samsung phone in the immediate sense might have better, more practical features, but they're not actually breaking any ground. I think if you really think about Apple, and I believe this is actually Apple refining its roots. This is Apple actually releasing a Macintosh.
Yeah.
So the phone that we have today is actually Apple II.
Yes.
And I believe the iPhone X is actually the Macintosh again, all over again. And it's only a little bit better, or it's got some interesting features. But I think what you'll see is they're going to use that platform you see in the X, and that's going to just blow everyone away in 5 years. So in 5 years, when you pick it up, you'll be going, this is the most amazing phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in the next few years, it's just going to be an evolution to get to the amazing phone.